I don't know whose idea this book was to novelise, but I am pleasantly surprised. I guess Mark Gatiss had some time to reflect on what was missing from this story, because there's something about this that is genuinely quite interesting. I generally find Mark Gatiss's work quite hit and mostly miss, but with this novelisation, he took a more unique angle at it, and I really appreciate him for doing that. Series 7 is one of my favourite series, but The Crimson Horror is probably my least favourite episode from that series, so I was not looking forward to reading this book, but I'm really glad I did. The Crimson Horror was released alongside a number of other novelizations, which I mentioned in my Dalek review, that being Resurrection of the Daleks, Revelation of the Daleks, The Witchfinders, Dalek, The Crimson Horror obviously, Doctor Who and the Pirate Planet, and the TV movie. All of which were noted down in issue 561 of Doctor Who magazine. I spoke a bit about how Robert Shearman and the rest of the authors were interviewed in this issue. Mark Gatiss talks about how he novelised The Crimson Horror, some of the stuff behind the scenes of the TV episode, and also that he wants to novelise The Unquiet Dead next, and he knows exactly how the first chapter would open. I definitely recommend picking up this issue if you haven't already. I forgot to note actually that this issue comes with this book, Doctor Who and the Library of Time, which I went over in my Dalek novelisation review. It has extracts from all of the books that were released, and it's even got the part of the Crimson Horror cover on it. It's told primarily from the perspective of the characters of the book, mostly Jenny, but also Mr. Thursday, who's the guy trying to figure out who killed his brother, and also even Strax and the Doctor, and even Ada, the daughter of Mrs. Gillyflower, the bad guy of the book. I do really appreciate the further inclusion of the Paternoster gang, as I do really quite like them, and I think they're quite underappreciated. Uniquely, the first few chapters are of an entirely different investigation a few years prior, with just the Doctor, Jenny and Vastra investigating the All Britannia Aptitude Contest, which is just Britain's Got Talent. The whole section is wildly interesting, and it adds a lot to the characterisation of Jenny, especially in the way that she speaks to the reader in a very strong Cockney accent, which I think Mark Gatiss has down very well. There's definitely not much to take away from this edition. I'm not entirely against it because it is quite fun, but with such a short book, I wonder why Mark Gatiss thought, oh, I'm going to take away 3 whole chapters and make a new adventure. There's only a very minor link with Mrs. Gillyflower, and that's it. There's a lot of those kinds of like minor additions. Strax's only time where he's kind of the main narrator of the book is little logs that he makes, and they're usually, again, quite irrelevant to the story. There's a lot of irrelevant additions, still quite nice additions. They're good to read. I'm just wondering why Mark Gatiss decided to take away from actually novelising the episode, which is fine. Like I've said before previously, I really want new stuff, but they do not really feel like they're involved with the actual story whatsoever, and more like fun additions. Like the Doctor has a whole page or 2 or 3 where he's just spouting nonsense. It's literally called The Diary of a Madman, I think, and there isn't, again, much link to the actual story. It's fun to read, and he's got Matt Smith's kind of characterization of the Doctor down in this novel. I'm just not sure why it's there. My main takeaway from it was the direct, very clear comparison to a judge in this contest who is just Simon Cowell, basically. And one of the characters, the bad guy, is the last of the castrati, which doesn't mean much until you find out he is without genitalia. The best part of this book is the atmosphere. I found that I was much more ingrained into the 1800s than I ever was with the TV episode. And I've come to wonder whether Mark Gatiss is perhaps more attuned to literature rather than TV. It takes what I believe is generally perceived as quite a weak story, with obviously the plot points and stuff like that remaining the same, but telling it in a much more unique way that only really a book can do, with first-person testimonials. It really makes you feel like you're reading a newspaper or a diary. Would have liked to maybe see some more development of Strax, because that is one of the failings of his character in general. Whilst I enjoy seeing him, he has no development whatsoever, so it would have been nice to have a little bit in here, because in a book is definitely where you can do that. I'd say the unique style of this book falls apart a lot more in the final act, in the final third of the book even. There's more just general kind of prose, less of the first person testimonials like I mentioned. Maybe Mark Gatiss realized, oh, hang on, I've actually got to make this story happen, and it will happen a lot slower if you've just got kind of Jenny or the doctor talking about it. That being said, it was very inoffensive and it was very easy to read and very interesting to kind of make the progress through this story that you're now really interested to read, because you feel like you're actually listening to these characters work through it. You know, I still feel for the Doctor and Ada's relationship. Like, I think that was a very unique thing to have. Again, I would have liked to explore that a little bit more, and I think maybe if you didn't have 3 chapters at the start that just were a random adventure, then it would have been a little bit better. And I think it does fall short of a much higher rating because of that. So I will be giving Doctor Who The Crimson Horror by Mark Gatiss a 7.5 out of 10. The Crimson Horror is only one of 2 11th Doctor novelizations. I know we're getting The Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone next year, but it would be very interesting to see some more Matt Smith novelizations. That being said, the next one up for me to read is one I've heard a lot of good things about and one I'm very interested to read. It's The Day of the Doctor by Stephen Moffat.